Welcome back to America's Now. I'm Elaine Reyes. As Mexico chooses a new leader, another change has been taking place in the past few years. Since 2008, the country has been trying to reform its judicial system, a system which people say works in such a way that those accused of crimes are presumed guilty. It is up to them to prove their innocence. The case of Antonio Zuniga, who is wrongly convicted of murder, was made into a documentary. It's become a cause célèbre for the shortcomings of justice in Mexico. America's Now contributing correspondent Ross Velton met Mr. Zuniga in Mexico City and files this report.
This man can break dance, he sings a bit of rap, and he's a movie star.
Su nombre completo, señor?
Zuniga Rodriguez José Antonio.
This film made Antonio Zuniga famous. It's called Presunto Culpable, or Presumed Guilty, and it was a big hit in Mexico when it came out last year. It's a story about the Mexican judicial system. It's a story about how it doesn't work. And it's a story only Antonio Zuniga can tell.
The police started interrogating me, and they'd say, "Where's the weapon?" So with that question hanging in the air, I'd say, "What weapon? I don't know what you're talking about."
That chat with the police was nearly 7 years ago. They said he'd been involved in the murder of a man, but Antonio Zuniga said he couldn't have been because he was selling video games on the day when his own life started to seem like fiction. The film explains that several witnesses confirmed they saw Mr. Zuniga selling things from his store, which was outside this aquarium. But the film also explains that the dead body was found in about 20 minutes walk up in this direction. It would have taken 40 minutes for Mr. Zuniga to walk from here to the body back to his store. But the police said he was guilty. Apparently, he'd been in two places at the same time. At his trial, he was appointed a lawyer, or at least someone who called himself a lawyer.
I ended up telling him what needed to be done. It would occur to me to say, "Hey, why don't you say this? Why don't we do this? Why don't we present this document?"
But in the end, Antonio Zuniga was convicted on the testimony of one man, a relative of the victim. He got 20 years in prison.
So how did you feel when they told you you're going to spend the next 20 years of your life in prison?
I don't think anyone can describe it. I think it's something so truly incredible. I can't describe it to you. I'd see people near me being given their sentences. Their knees would give way and they'd fall to the ground. I think the thing I remember most is that I went for about a week without talking. And everyone would say to me, "Why don't you speak?" I don't know, I have nothing to say.
How could this have happened to a man who seemed to be so obviously innocent? Miguel Carbonell is a lawyer who thinks he has the answer.
The key point here is that the Mexican penal system is broken. It simply doesn't work. It doesn't work for victims of crime. It doesn't work for those going through a legal process. It doesn't work for people in our prisons. And it doesn't even work for the authorities.
Mexican justice didn't work for Antonio Zuniga. It hasn't worked for many people like him. And now it's trying to change. For the past 5 years, judicial reform in Mexico has been taking place at a federal and a local level. And a brand new way of deciding whether someone is innocent or guilty should be ready by 2016. Miguel Carbonell helped write the first draft of these changes.
We proposed reforms to make the system more modern and efficient at every stage of the Mexican penal process. How they investigate crimes, how they accuse people they think are responsible for those crimes, how they are judged. Criminal trials today in Mexico are practically secret. Nobody knows what's going on. It's all written.
So the country is trying to switch to having trials where the arguments are spoken, and they're spoken in public.
A closed system, a secret system, doesn't allow for accusations against innocent people to be stopped. The process keeps advancing. It just keeps on advancing.
Until it takes something to stop it. In Antonio Zuniga's story, that something was two lawyers who took up his case. They found out his lawyer at the first trial had forged his license. That was enough to get him a retrial, this time with a proper lawyer. But the way in which he was judged stayed the same. There's someone here at Mexico's Supreme Court who agrees the legal system needs to change. But Carlos Perez says it won't be easy.
The problem is at the local level, because not all the states within the Federal Republic have the same amount of resources or the same political commitment to make this change happen.
And until it does happen, Mexico's prisons, which are already full, are having to make room for people the system has failed. The state of Mexico is one place where oral trials are now being used. The state's old boss, and probably the country's new one, now wants to make sure this happens across the country. Doing so might help solve another big Mexican problem, the fight against drug cartels, which has left tens of thousands dead. The idea is to make the legal system better able to convict members of organised crime, because at the moment this man says 98% of crimes are going unpunished, and almost as many aren't even reported.
By making everything more transparent, this reform can increase the number of crimes being reported, increase levels of trust, and all of us as a society can push for a Mexico with less violence.
Antonio Zuniga was found guilty at his retrial. Parts of this film were shown at the appeal against that decision. They helped to prove he was innocent.
Mr. Zuniga spent over 2 years in prison. On the day he was finally released, a crowd had gathered to greet him. And one of the first things he did was to take his baby in his arms, a baby which had been born while he was in this place.
He also got married from behind bars, a baby and a wife, but no freedom to enjoy them.
In the whole of this process, what was the thing that most upset you?
I think it was seeing my family. It seems to me that going through this type of criminal trial doesn't just affect you, it traps your family. From what I remember, we lost everything. We sold everything.
Some say the main obstacle to reform is in our heads. If we don't think it's possible and that reform is good, it won't go ahead.
Antonio Zuniga thinks the secret to breakdancing is also in the head.
When you make a wrong step, you can't stop and think, I made a mistake.
He says if you do, you'll only go on getting the steps wrong. Now Mexico's judicial system is stopping to think, so it can start getting its steps right.